Okay, good.
I'm gonna go get something there. Mine said the University of South Florida. Got a little green, a little See, each president has one of these. Each president has maybe I'm supposed to have that. Maybe it's a mom or something. Gone to the bed. Either. Maybe I just look right.
You keep going.
8:30, why don't we try to call the Budget Committee to order? I think, looking around, we might have quorum. Mikey, you're looking panicked, so will you?
Are we live, Greg? Yes, we are. Okay. I was looking for Mr. Tripp, but let me call the roll and we'll see how we're doing. Ms. Duncan? Here. Mr. Franklin is not here. Mr. Hosseini had to leave. Dr. Marshall?
Mikey, I can't hear you.
Dr. Marshall?
Here.
Mr. Root had to leave. Mr. Tripp? Vice Chair, Mr. Beard?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mikey. Welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting this morning. We've been pretty well briefed on everything, and certainly you all have had 2 days of presentations and are aware of where we're going, particularly with differential tuition and the fees. But before we start, I wanted to just spend a minute and reiterate a little bit about the conference call that we had on June 7th, talking about the new legislation and the new fee opportunity that the legislature has given us, and particularly with regard to the process that I think we're going to need to determine as we move forward with these new potential fees. House Bill 7237 gives the board certain new responsibilities with regard to not just new fees, but A, new fees, second, increasing other fees, which are currently capped, and 3, flexible tuition policies, which include market rate tuition for graduate and continuing ed courses. And we had some pretty meaningful discussion on our June 7th conference call, talking about the challenges that legislation imposes upon us and our responsibility with regard to determining ways to analyze our fee proposals when and as they come forward. It was determined at that conference call not to take up any new fees under the 7237 language this year until we get some provisions in place to do the reviews. And I know that was disappointing to several universities who had submitted fees, but we think with regard to our responsibility to the legislature and to the students, it's better served that we put some regulations and rules and some analysis in place before we try to move forward. I think development of rules and regulations for the new fees will probably not be that difficult. Notwithstanding, I think that coming up with some of the rules and regulations for the additional tuition policies, particularly the market rate tuition policies, things of that nature, may be more challenging as we move forward. So it's going to be an interesting dialogue and conversation. At that June 7th meeting, I've asked staff to work on a few regulations with us over the summer and bring those to us for review later in summer or possibly even fall. And what I'd like to ask staff as well is to form a small working group to develop regulations with regard to additional issues that may arise as we look at these topics. I'll be asking Chair Parker if she would assist in appointing a working group of the board members and others to sit down and try to develop some regulations with regard to new fees, the market rate tuition, and other items. And Chair Parker, what I think would be helpful would be a work group consisting possibly of Governor Duncan as the chair of Student Academic Affairs Committee, Governor Franklin, our student rep, certainly myself or Vice Chair Beard of the Budget Committee, so that we can work with some of the universities and some of the staff in order to come up with some fees that can be implemented, and we'll talk about that at the meeting. In your folders, just so you'll have them, and they're in all the board folders, there is a blue document. It is stamped draft. Just so you know, it's in the Today folder. It sets out all of the various rules and responsibilities that we have with regard to this new legislation and some of the issues that we're going to have to deal with. So I'll commend that to your reading for the future so you'll have a sense about what the task is. One of the issues we also need to be thoughtful about as a committee, particularly considering these new fees and fee proposals, is the timing of when we approve them. Certainly the legislature passed the legislation. We received it at the end of May, and universities wisely jumped on the bandwagon and submitted fees. As I said, we won't be considering those this year, but the question does come to us as when we should consider those fees. Should we do that in fall prior to the budget cycle? Should we wait until after the legislative session to get a better sense of where the universities are? It's a conversation that we need to have. I'd look for input from some of the universities throughout the process as when is most efficient for that. The legislation provides that fees can only begin in the fall semester, so certainly we would have to do it at or before this June meeting next year so that universities could have it, but this is certainly the latest date. So the question would be, do you do it before the legislature, following the legislature, or somewhere in between? And I'll look for guidance from the universities and the board members there. If there's no other questions there, perhaps we can move on to the agenda, but I wanted to just put that out there because it is a major issue. Any questions, thoughts, issues with regard to the fee discussion? Okay. Seeing none, why don't we move forward on the agenda to item 2, which is approve the 2011 to 2012 LBR operating policy guidelines. These have come to us several times. We've been briefed on these. They're in the packet for final approval. Are there any questions with regard to any of these guidelines that we need to address? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the guidelines attached to the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the motion carries. Item 3 is the approve the notice of intent to amend the BOG regulation on Regulation 7.008, waiver of tuition and fees, and 9.009, preparation of SUS financial statements. There are 2 regulations in the packet that we're amending, and for those of you who are new to the committee, and a refresher for our other members, our regulation review is typically a 2-step process. We'll first consider and approve amended regulation and then ask the full board to approve it this afternoon. The amended regulations will then be posted on the board's website, and the public can then make comments for up to 30 days following our meeting. And after that, we'll consider the final amended regulation at our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is currently scheduled for September. So this is step 1 of the process. It'll be considered at the meeting this afternoon and then posted for 30 days. We'll look at these again in September. First regulation is 7.008, waiver of tuition and fees, which are in pages 7 to 14 in your packet. The changes to this regulation are a result of the changes from the legislature last session. Are there any questions with regard to the regulations proposed for the amended 7.008? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to amend Regulation .7008? We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The second regulation is 9.009, preparation of SUS financial statements, which is found on pages 15 and 16 of the packet. This amended regulation gives us a date certain, which is actually October 31st, on which all university financial statement information has to be submitted to the board office. I know the universities have been consulted on this. There's been conversation. Is there any discussion on this regulation? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Thank you very much. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay. Item 4. This is the consideration of our tuition differential fee proposals. I know I missed the last 2 days, but you all have seen and heard a great deal from each of the universities, and from my updates, it seems as though they've done an extraordinary job in setting forth their plans. As you know, each university is requesting a 7% increase in addition to the 8% base increase approved by the legislature. This will be the second year in a row that the maximum is requested by all universities. And for the record, the legislature, in its budgeting process, assumed that each of the universities would request and receive a 7% tuition differential increase. So this should be no surprise. Staff has put together a small slideshow, which I'd like to just run you through to sort of give you some perspective on where we are as Florida. Slide number 1, you see Florida is the 48th in undergraduate tuition and fees for 2009, 2010, the national average being 7,020, our number being 4,382. We are 14th in non-resident undergraduate tuition and fees for 09-10. The national average is 14,707. We are at 16,972 for our non-resident tuition and fees. So we are above the national average in that category. I think that's the only place. Educational funding per FTE in student fiscal year 2009. The blue line indicates the legislative component, the government-funded component of the funding, and the yellow line represents the tuition funding component. As you can see, we are actually in the top 25% of states with regard to legislative commitment to funding. The yellow line shows you the tuition portion, and we are strongly in the bottom with regard to the tuition component as compared to other states. As you can see, the total funding of $88.72. U.S. average is $11,036. And don't we wish we lived in Wyoming over on the far side over there. Pretty stunning numbers from Wyoming. But as you can see, the legislature is in the top 25% on per student funding in the country. And tuition is where we have certainly fallen behind a bit. This next slide reflects our last 10 years undergraduate tuition and fee increase. As you can see, from 2000 to 2001, our tuition and fees were $2,364. 09-10, they're $4,382, right at a $2,000 increase over the last decade for our students based on 30 credit hours a year. So that's certainly growing. It's growing at a pretty steady rate, still well below the national averages across the board. This is an interesting slide. This is our undergraduate tuition and fees, state university system, to the U.S. average for 09 and 10. As you can see, the U.S. average is $7,020. The SUS average is $4,382, and then we have all 11 universities across the way. You can get a sense of where they are vis-a-vis the national average of tuition and fees. This next slide presumes that we have approved our differential tuition today. And what this shows is a 2010 to 2011 estimated. We have assumed a 6.5% increase in the national average across the board, assuming that every other state raises their tuition 6.5%. So you can see there the national average on the far left slide is 74.76. Even after the differential tuition increases, the SUS average is still 49.14, and you can see each of the respective universities and where they are, the yellow line being current number, the blue line being the blue box being the differential tuition component. So notwithstanding the increases today, we are still going to be well below the national average with regard to tuition and fees for our students.
Is the 6.5, is that all colleges or public universities?
I believe that's just public universities. Yeah. Finally, this is, as you would expect, this is the tuition differential revenue and where the money is going. In 2009, 2010, the proportions went, obviously, the blue lines are undergraduate instruction, the goal of the differential tuition, the green box being need-based financial aid, and 2010 to 2011, it's the same. We've got 30% of the proceeds of differential tuition going to need-based financial aid as required by statute. This slide takes a look at each of our state universities, and you can get a sense of the number of students and the dollars that were awarded to each of them on a mean average with regard to need-based financial aid as a result of differential tuition. And if you're doing math, we have approximately 13,000 students total who received need-based financial aid as a result of the tuition differential increases from 2 years ago, last year, and this year. But this is the 2009-2010. This is last year's differential tuition need-based financial aid increases. So 13,000 students received it. Certainly helpful as we move forward. Interesting slide. And that concludes the presentation with regard to where we are on the differential tuition. I know that we have talked about it for a couple of days, or you all talked about it for a couple of days. I'm wondering if there are any questions, any additional conversation required. We certainly have time this morning to talk about them. All 11 university proposals are in our packages. I know there was some conversation with regard to University of South Florida and the issues relating to their branch campus tuition increases and the proportionality of that. Ralph has been kind enough overnight to provide us with information which should be in your packet that sets out and clarifies the sources of revenue for the larger dollar amount increases on those branch campuses. Most of that money, almost 48%, in fact, across the board, comes from student-approved increases in existing fees, activity and service fee, and others. Ralph is available to answer any questions there, taking a look at the information he's provided you, if there is any interest. Governor Duncan, you had a question.
Well, no, I had a comment. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
I have a process question, Mr. Chair. Because it sounds like you were going in the direction of considering these all at one time, and my request would be if we would consider them individually.
Happy to do that. I was going in the direction of considering them all at once, but we can take them university by university if you wish.
Yeah, I just think given what we're considering, I think it would be good for us to, to talk about each one individually.
Okay, we'll certainly do it that way. Governor Duncan, you had a comment?
Yeah, in looking at this, I want to start by saying that I am in support of these differential tuitions, and I do appreciate the fact that the legislature has given us that opportunity, and I also concur that it looks like they've planned on us doing this. It's not going to be a surprise to them if we pass these fees. But, that said, I think there is a lot of pressure and responsibility that is on us to make sure that we're being good fiscal stewards of this and that we're not just approving the fees. And, that we want to make sure that, we are being in keeping with the intent and that the fees are being used the way we want. And listening to all the presentations from all the institutions, to me, it does seem like they've all worked very hard to be in keeping with the goals and purposes of the fees that were out there. But, that said, also having worked on the Shared Services Committee for some time, and, I do believe that all the institutions have worked very hard to cut costs. I think that, while there is probably always opportunity to do a little better, that some of the next rounds of opportunities to do better probably will require us acting a little more like a system rather than 11 different institutions. And I just would like to kind of hear from the Chancellor a little bit on the efficiency regulation that he was developing, and would like to kind of know that as we're moving forward with the fee increases, we're also keeping our eye on the ball about the cost-cutting side of the equation and how we can kind of make sure that as we're looking at fees going forward that we are always making sure that we're hitting the balance on the efficiency side. One of the things that I think is probably the most concise analogy I've ever heard our Chancellor say that really stuck with me was that the stimulus funding was not a bridge, it was a pier, and a rather short one at that. And I'm concerned as we look at what may or may not happen with the stimulus funding, knowing that we are, they're going to be reconvening the Select Committee on the Florida economy, not knowing the impact of the Gulf oil spill on what the state budget may be, that we may very well be in for some hard times. And I just think it's really important as we have these discussions that we are also making sure we're looking at, and that I'd like him to kind of come back to us with some recommendations on how we look at other cost-cutting opportunities that don't make these fees not intended for their purpose, and that it doesn't become a shell game that we're just putting more burden on the students and using it to replace general revenue. And so again, I'm not sure that it's in the same motion, but I do think it's a correlated conversation that we have to be discussing both points as we're talking about new fees.
Thank you, Governor Duncan. Chancellor, would you like to respond?
Frank, before you go, could you also add in whether or not we would consider an idea of making fees time certain and therefore coming back to the board to see whether or not they've served their purpose and whether they should be renewed? These fees seem to have a life of their own. Once in place, they're there forever.
Yeah, I think all of that has to do with the way we craft this regulation. I really do think this reg is important. It is not public relations intended. It is really meant to help us better organize the process of efficiency. The board has been working on the issue of articulated efficiency long before I became chancellor. And as we've heard during the presentations, I think the universities individually do a great job finding efficiencies. And I think there are some cross-cutting efficiencies that we're dealing with as a state. But I also believe, and I think the board does, and I think the institutions do, that there's still great opportunity out there for some better articulated efficiencies. Purchasing is one that came up, and we heard so many of the universities talk about their purchasing process and how it's been coordinated throughout the institution. And one wonders if there aren't some opportunities there for statewide contracting and purchasing opportunities to a greater degree. And I'm sure everybody can think of other examples. So I think the regulation that we put in place needs to be reflective of what we do, but also the constant and annual search for new and improved efficiencies. One of the things I hope these wonderful presentations have done over the last 2 days is evidence the fact that we do a lot of things really very well. Sometimes I'm not sure the rest of the world knows that, and I think that this regulation, among many things, will not only require us to search for great articulation efficiency opportunities system-wide, but will also give us an annual opportunity to evidence those to the people who need to know that we are doing those things. You can never underestimate the importance of the partnership relationship with the Florida legislature. And again, you can say, oh, we do efficiency measures all the time. Well, sometimes you just have to say, and here they are, so that people will regularly understand that you don't just do efficiency measures when times are tough. You're always on the search for great system-wide efficiency measures. I think it was Governor Colson yesterday who was talking about the fact that over the last 3 years we've cut a significant amount of money, to say the least. I'm still not sure that to some people we've gotten the appropriate acknowledgement of those reductions, because I think we could do a better job of saying, and here they are, as opposed to saying, yeah, we've cut 23% or 25% of our general revenue budget. I think we've got to do a better job as a system of proving that we did. We know we did. We had to live through that. But I think we need to demonstrate to other people what methodologies we actually use to do that. And you saw much of that evidenced here amongst us during the presentations by the institutions. So yes, we will continue to work on this regulation. It is important, not only for cost-saving opportunities, but also to evidence those cost-saving opportunities to one another and to the people who matter to us.
Thank you, Chancellor. Governor Duncan.
Just two quick follow-ups. Having worked for 3 years on shared services, let me reiterate, system-wide savings does not necessarily mean centralization, so do not panic out there. It means, how can we be smart about best leveraging the assets that we have? And so we're looking for creative solutions. It could be different consortiums of universities that make sense. It could be, different areas of things. It doesn't necessarily, it does not mean, not necessarily, it just does not mean that it is going to always be cheaper or better to centralize it. I think there's a lot of case studies that go both ways on that point. But I think the whole point is to look at it and also to demonstrate. I think the one thing that I have been really impressed with that I think needs to be part of our messaging when we talk about the cuts we've done is how strategic they have been to not just cut across the board, but to really cut in the places that are going to better prepare our universities to be ready to capitalize on the opportunities as the market rebounds and that we're there. Because I think it's not that easy. Everybody's been pretty strategic about it, so I would encourage you guys when you're pulling that together and looking at it that you do it in the context of how it's better preparing us to be more competitive going forward. It wasn't just taking the hit.
Great. Thank you, Governor Duncan. Other thoughts before we consider each of the universities' tuition differential fee increases? Governor Tripp.
I need to just correct my statement. I was having a little trouble hearing you down there. I didn't mean to rethink the tuition differential fee, as Dick pointed out to me. I'm talking about when we get to fees in general, the idea of whether or not we come back.
So you weren't proposing sunsetting differential tuition fee?
No.
Okay. So
want to make that record
wanted to
clear.
just be sure of it. Okay. Thank you, Governor Tripp. Any other questions, thoughts, or concerns before we move into each of the universities' differential tuitions? Okay. We're going to take them up in the order that they presented. So let's first consider the differential fee tuition increase requested by Florida State University. Is there a motion to approve?
I have one request. One more.
Oops.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Mr. Chair.
Madam Chair.
Would you mind going ahead and at least putting on the record, if you follow that little cheat sheet form that they developed, would you mind putting on the record the I guess, a proposed change in that percent, just something that kind of identifies, and I understand we've had,
If I could put my hands on that cheat sheet,
have
Madam
mine.
Chair, I would do so.
it kind of lays it all out in the order that we received the information. I just think that kind of sets it in perspective, and in that way, if I have a specific question about something, it kind of shows why I would ask the question.
Okay?
Thank you.
In that case, I will look for a motion to approve the request from Florida State University amending their overall tuition from 2009, 2010, 45, 66, 10 to 2010-11 of $5,237.80, a change of $671.70, or 14.71%.
So moved.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion with regard to the motion?
I would like to hope that in the future, it doesn't appear that we're kind of rubber stamping these. I feel that there's tremendous amount of pressure right now on myself, and I don't know if others feel that way, that we've been told that that all of these increases that have occurred in the United States over the last 15 or 20 years have been good increases. Well, much of the dialogue has said that the rate of inflation in the university system and the college system has far outpaced that of the rest of the world in the U.S. I know we've been told that the legislature in their budget decided and almost said that we know you're just going to raise that tuition. One of the things we've done is we've asked the legislature to give us the authority to set tuition and that we would be good stewards of that tuition. And I think we fall short in this situation because I don't think there has been the honest conversation that would make me feel better, that I could defend to the parents and the children who are going to have to pay this tuition. And so I feel like I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't just vote for this. And so it may be symbolic, but I don't think that I, in all good conscience, can say that I know enough about everything that we should be increasing tuition, in this case 14% in a year. I think we should increase it some. I don't think it's that amount. And I won't speak to the rest of them because I know that, I just apply this to every other motion that's coming up.
Thank you, Governor Tripp. And let me clarify my own statements from before. The sheet I'm reading off of contains total dollar changes from 09-10 and 10-11, which includes not only the 7% differential tuition fee proposal, as well as the legislature's tuition increase, as well as all of the fee increases from each of the universities. So the dollar number and the percentage change per student that I quoted is a total after everything is included. We are only approving the 7% differential component of the tuition increase. So as I give you dollar amount changes per the sheet requested by Madam Chair and the percent change of dollars to students, that will be in the record, but the 7% tuition differential is all that we're approving. We're not reestablishing baseline tuitions anywhere or anything. Madam Chair.
I just wanted to apologize for giving you that sheet and not clarifying that, but thank you very much for accommodating.
Well, it was fascinating when Tim's face went the color of the drape behind him.
Yes.
And then I realized that something was awry.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. That was just the only sheet I had in front of me, so thank you so much for accommodating.
Not at all, Madam Chair. I was willing to take the hit for that and leave you out of it, but
Chairman,
that's okay.
Chairman, let me just say that each university's presented to us in the last 2 days their uses and all that. And so we've had a lot of debate and discussion and questions and answers on each one of these, so that ought to be in the record too.
Wonderful. I think the last 2 days of record are in the record. Thank you, Governor. Madam Chair.
The one thing that I do recall from the conversation that we had with Florida State University and the comments from Dr. Barron is that we commented about their library renovation project, and one of the indicators that he realized that his library renovation was paying dividends for his students was that his Starbucks daily take was like $7,000 a day. Of course, it'd be nice if we could just have half of that. I think that'd be wonderful. But I just think that that's one of those kind of outside quirky indicators showing how much value the students are finding in the services that are being provided by the university. And certainly, I think that the $1.9 million renovation that's a part of this tuition differential request is certainly noteworthy. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Governor Duncan.
Yes, and just also for the record, I think, we've had hours and hours of calls and conversations regarding cost savings and ongoing, between the accountability stuff that Governor Edwards had been doing and the Shared Services Task Force, that I don't think any things should be read into reviewing these, and even in these 2 days. I think all of us have spent a lot of time on the phone with a lot of the institutions. We've been briefed on this a lot. We've spent time with them looking through their budgets and their shared services ideas. There are other savings. I know I've reviewed a number of presentations from the institutions about all the different cuts they've made and how they've tried to improve things. So it really is a cumulative collection of knowledge that's resulting in my vote in favor of this.
Thank you, Governor Duncan. Other comments or questions with regard to the FSU tuition differential? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of approval of the FSU tuition differential increase, please say aye.
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 And opposed. Motion carries. Whoop, and there was a no. I'm sorry. Governor Tripp voting no. University of North Florida, 2009-2010, tuition and fees, $41.93, 10 to 11. $47.6520, a total change of $571.80 for students, a total overall change of 13.64%. Remember, we're approving only the 7% differential increase. Is there a motion to approve University of North Florida's tuition fees?
So moved.
So motion, is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on University of North Florida? Governor Franklin.
In recent conversations that I've had with the students and student government at the University of North Florida, they don't agree with the different tuition. A lot of them feel that it's going to be pricing some of their students out of education. At the same time, they're really afraid they're not going to be able to see the benefit from it as well, even from, I guess, the last year's different tuition increase. So that's going to be reflected in my vote in reference to their sentiments and in reference to the increased differential tuition for the University of North Florida.
Thank you, Governor Franklin. Other comments with regard to North Florida? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the tuition differential fee increase of 7% for University of North Florida, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed.
Nay. Opposed.
Okay, we actually may have to roll call that one because I only heard a couple of ayes. Mikey, would you roll call that? I don't know which of us are committee members and are not.
Okay. All right. Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Franklin?
Against.
Dr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mr. Root, are you on the line? Okay, he was going to try to call in, Mr. Chair. Mr. Tripp?
No.
Mr. Beard?
Yeah.
And Mr. Perez?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Mikey. Next is Florida A&M University's tuition differential fee, 2009-2010, $4,119.90, 10 to 11, $4,625.30, a change of $505.40, or a 12.27% overall change. Again, let me remind you, we're only approving the 7% tuition differential fee. Is there a motion approving Florida A&M Universities?
So moved.
A
Second.
motion and a second. Any discussion on FAMU?
I have a question.
Madam Chair.
Governor Franklin, I didn't think to ask this during the presentation from Florida A&M, but what type of processes have you followed at your university to get your students' input on this differential fee for your university?
We actually are involved in the allocation of the differential tuition, and so while their students sit on a committee that actually deals with, opening up more coursework to kind of help with the graduation and retention rates, we kind of decide on whether or not we want to implement it for the next year. and they also are involved in the entire fee committee structure as well. So there are a lot of negotiations in reference to what local fees we're going to set, whether or not we're going to increase those or not increase those in reference to the differential component as well. And so a lot of the students looked into, since a large percentage of our students get federal Pell Grant, and because of whether or not people like the healthcare reform bill that happened in Washington, there's going to be a lot of dollars that's increasing the federal Pell Grant as well. And so having that cushion for the majority of our students was the reason why the majority of the students actually agreed with it and understood the reasons behind it as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Governor Franklin. Other thoughts or issues with regard to Florida A&M University? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries. USF, we will take, well, we might as well take them all at once unless there's an objection from the USF campuses.
Yes, I mean, if
You want them all
would-
individually?
Please.
Okay,
Thank
wonderful. We'll take USF Tampa. Initially, 2009-2010, 4577, 10 to 11, 5198, a change of $621, or a 13.57% change on the cash basis. Again, we're only considering the 7% proposed tuition differential increase. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
A
Second.
motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
Governor Tripp opposing. Motion carries. USF Sarasota Manatee, 3665.50 and 0910, 4547.20 and 1011, a change of $881.70, or a 24.05% overall increase for the students. Again, we're approving only the 7% differential tuition fee. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A
Second.
motion and a second. Any discussion? Governor, Madam Chair.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask that if I could have Dr. Genschaft or the provost, and I understand we were provided the information, but we didn't have that during our discussion previously.
Correct.
And I
Ralph Provost has provided us with an information sheet that should be in your packets, specifying the breakout of where the genesis of these larger increases come from. But I know that Ralph is prepared to address that for us. Ralph, will you take the podium?
Just before their explanation, I didn't get that information in my packet. That may be a function of not being a member of the committee. I don't know. I don't have anything.
Is it possible for us
Tim,
to get
do we
some-
have sufficient copies for?
We'll get copies.
Okay.
And thank you for indulging me on this, Mr. Chair.
Madam Chair, this is important stuff. I mean, this is, as I said on the conference call June 7th, raising tuition and raising fees is absolutely no light matter. This is integral for our students and important for our state. So I think we need to be as deliberate as we can be in this process. Ralph?
Mr. Chair, good morning and thank you. As you saw from the bar graph provided earlier, even with the highest year-to-year change in the total cost of tuition and fees for a full-time student at
Actually, Ralph, let me apologize. I had the only copy of that document, so we're going to have staff make copies. I'll ask the indulgence of the committee that we skip over USF, and then once we get the copies, Ralph, if you can come back up, it'd probably be better if everybody's looking at the same piece of paper. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. If we can postpone consideration of the motion on USF, Sarasota Manatee, the motion that exists right now, is there a motion to table that until we come back to it? Got a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Let's move on to Florida Gulf Coast University then. The 2009-2010 tuition was $4,426.50. The 10-11 proposal is $48.8970 with a total change of $463.20, or a 10.46% increase. Again, remember, we are only approving the 7% differential tuition proposal in that package. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
On a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any discussion on Florida Gulf Coast University's proposed fee? Governor Franklin.
Once again, in conversation with my colleagues at Florida Gulf Coast University, they don't believe in the full 7% differential increase. Some of their reasons are they feel that that's directly connected to some of the raises in faculty and staff as well as the bonuses. And so because of that, they don't feel that they should be, I guess, carrying the grunt or bearing the burden to offer those type of financial allocations to the faculty. And so that's going to be also reflected in my vote.
Thank you, Governor Franklin. Other comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the fee proposal for Florida Gulf Coast University, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, if more of you don't vote vocally, because that sounded like a 2-2 again, we're going to have to call the roll again.
You want to do it by hand?
Yeah, why don't we just do it by hand? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Okay, and opposed? Thank you, Governor Tripp. Good suggestion. Motion carries. Florida International University's fee proposal 2009-2010 was $4,569. 10-11 is $5,091.38. A difference of $528.78, or 11.42%. Once again, remember, we're approving only the 7% differential tuition fee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion with regard to FIU? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed.
Opposed?
Motion carries.